everyone. I'm Kelsey Misbrenner, managing editor with Solar Power World magazine, and I'm here with Alyssa Edwards today. She is the VP of Environmental Affairs and Government Relations for Lightsource BP. So welcome to the show, Alyssa.
Hi, Kelsey. Thanks so much. It's good to be here.
So tell me how you got into solar. You told me before the call that you started in 2020, but what happened to lead you there?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of been a journey. I've always been interested in the environment and climate. I think even before it was really vogue to do so. And I've sort of, set my whole education, I'm 45 now. That was a long time ago, but I've really set my whole education around it. My undergrad is in environmental science. My master's is in environmental economics. I always followed Al Gore back in the day, and I just always saw this as such just this huge crisis for humanity. It's funny though, because when I graduated from grad school in 2005, I remember I have an uncle, and he came up to me and he said, "What are you going to do with that degree? That's totally worthless." And it's just funny because thinking about the trends and the thinking around 2005 to now has really changed. I really set my whole education around the environment and climate. When I got out of grad school, I joined Gamesa Energy, which is a wind developer and manufacturer of wind turbines in 2005. Worked there for about 5 or 6 years. I moved to EDF Renewables, where I led environmental affairs there for about a decade, and then I joined Lightsource BP in 2020, right before the pandemic.
Okay. Can you kind of give me the Cliff's Notes on Lightsource BP and its relationship with oil and gas company BP?
Yeah, sure. So Lightsource is a privately held company. We're a 50-50 JV with BP. We were formed in 2010 in the UK. So we've been solar developers for over a decade. And we've really grown to a global leadership position. We have almost 1,000 team members across 18 countries, which is pretty amazing. In December 17, this is sort of the evolution of it all. In December 17, BP acquired a 43% ownership position in Lightsource. So that's really how we became connected with them. And then we rebranded the company to be Lightsource BP. And then in 2 years later, in December 2019, BP purchased additional equity in Lightsource BP, and then it became a 50-50 joint venture partner in the business. So that's sort of the evolution of it. Since BP's first investment, our activities, Lightsource BP's activities have expanded. We used to be in 5 countries, now we're in 18 countries, including the US. In 2021, BP acquired 9 gigawatts of solar projects from a company called 7X Energy. And we are taking those assets, and we are developing them, and we are putting them into construction and operation. So Lightsource has a really interesting history, but we've grown tremendously over the past decade plus. So it's been really cool to be on that journey.
Okay, got it. So you wrote a series about the importance of environmental stewardship in solar development, especially utility scale solar development. Tell me why that's important to you, and about some of Lightsource BP's efforts to be environmental stewards.
Yeah, so I loved writing that piece. I think it really, embodies what Lightsource BP stands for in terms of how we're sort of reimagining solar and how we're doing solar a bit differently. And I think it really aligns with our ethos. When I joined Lightsource in 2020, in the US, we were still pretty young, but we knew that we wanted to tell sort of a different story with solar, which is adding on benefits beyond, clean renewable energy. So sort of the way that we look at solar facilities, and the projects that we work on, we sort of start with the vegetation underneath and around the panels. If you've ever been to a solar facility, you know that the footprint is actually extremely light, right? There's all this available land underneath and around the panels where we can really add biodiversity and ecosystem benefits. So we start with, large scale vegetation installations underneath and around the arrays. We work with internal and external experts to curate seed mixes that are planted and then provide habitat for pollinators and other wildlife. That's like our standard offering. We do that on every single project. We just put a lot of thought and creativity into how we can grow vegetation that is beneficial, but also is compatible with the solar operations, right? Related to height and fire risk and all these things that you have to deal with. We might outside the array do, we call them high value pollinator gardens. So big, lush, beautiful pollinator gardens that, support pollinator species. We might add other types of habitat that supports birds and bats, reptiles, things like that. And then from there, we see if we have an opportunity for agrivoltaics. And agrivoltaics is the combination of solar and agriculture. So we have quite a few projects now in the US that have sheep grazing underneath and around the panels. Sheep grazing, also contributes to biodiversity. The sheep waste, the compaction of the soil, just the act of grazing itself is incredibly beneficial for habitat and vegetation. Local farmers, we pay them to essentially manage the land for us, right? So it's kind of like you're paying a team to come out and mow the area to keep the vegetation at the right height. Well, the sheep are basically little mowers for us. And it also offers a diversified revenue to farmers in rural areas, which is great. So we love that there's a biodiversity and a social nexus there. We're looking at other types of agrivoltaics as well. We're looking at partnering with Department of Energy on some research to grow food crops underneath solar panels. So, we always say on my team that the possibilities are endless. It just takes creativity and a lot of thought and a lot of science, and sort of a willingness to see what kind of multi-use opportunities there are for solar. So it's a pretty fun job that I have to sort of come up with these ideas, and every project is different in terms of what benefits can be added and what makes sense in different ecoregions.
Absolutely. How do these efforts help with kind of winning over communities that might not be sold on the arrays?
Yeah. So, I had mentioned there's a really nice social nexus, community nexus with integrated agriculture and solar. And there's no question that in some areas where we work, there is increased social resistance. But we do find that when we, for all of our projects, we're partnering with the communities. But when we can extend stewardship and operation and care and maintenance of the solar facility with our landowners, with the community, the support just grows from there, right? Because it can offer, like I mentioned, a diversified revenue source. We have a project in Pennsylvania where a neighboring landowner and farmer, he and his son bring over 500 sheep and help us, graze the site in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. And, the impact to this family's farm and the ability to keep their farm for generations to come, and knowing that they have a place where their sheep can graze, because land is a commodity, of course. and there's additional payment, it's just been really beneficial for, for farmers in Pennsylvania and other places where we're doing sheep grazing.
Great. Um, Tell me about your government relations part of your job. Are you doing lobbying at the state and federal level?
Yep. So I really wear two hats at Lightsource. I lead environmental affairs, and then, as you mentioned, I also lead government relations. So there, we're really sort of focusing on two areas of work. One is to inform our teams and advise them on emerging regulatory and legislative issues. And then the second is advocacy, right? So we're doing a lot of advocacy as Lightsource BP, at the state and federal level. A great recent example is the Inflation Reduction Act. We partner with the Solar Energy Industry Association, otherwise known as SEIA, and other trades to advance legislation that's beneficial for the industry. So we're really active in that space. And then when it comes to state markets, there's a lot happening across the landscape in the U.S. With respect to solar and renewable energy in general. So we're very plugged into the state legislatures where we're working.
Okay. And does Lightsource BP have projects in most states, or are there certain regions you're concentrating on?
Yeah, so we are I think we're in 14 states right now. And I wouldn't say we focus on certain regions. I mean, we're always looking for opportunities in, every state in the US. Some markets are just, more appealing than others sometimes. And that's related to a lot of different things, including, electricity pricing and availability of transmission and certain legislative conditions in different states.
Okay. What has been the most rewarding moment of your career so far in solar?
Yeah, so I guess I sort of think of that. I think of that in two ways. One, from a government relations perspective. I mean, there's no question that when the Inflation Reduction Act passed this past August, that was just really incredible moment, I think, for those of us in solar and all of renewable energy, and really, anyone who's been following the U.S. Congress and our actions or inactions on climate change. It's the most progressive climate legislation ever passed in the U.S. I'm not sure this opportunity is going to come around again. And when I think about, my wonderful colleagues at Lightsource and outside of Lightsource that worked tirelessly, truly, to get that passed, it's pretty amazing. So that was a big moment, I would say, for me professionally and also personally. From an environmental affairs perspective, I think what's been so rewarding is to get out to solar sites where we've engaged with community members on agrivoltaics and sheep grazing, and seeing how that relationship just really, really works, and really just sort of from my perspective, knowing how we've worked so hard to build site-specific programming around sheep grazing and agrivoltaics, and really the first project I went to see sheep grazing in action at a Lightsource BP project was in Franklin County, Pennsylvania. We call it NITNI 1. It's a project that we did in partnership with Penn State University. And it's just such a gorgeous site. The mountains, and the day I was there was a clear blue sky, and there's 500 sheep, managing the land and stewarding the land. And I just thought, this is really cool. This is sort of the future of solar. So I guess two things.
It sounds very dreamy. I would have liked to see that too.
Yeah.
So tell me, we definitely talked about how all of the projects are pretty unique with your kind of dual use and stewardship lens, but can you point to one specific unique project that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, so we do have a project in Indiana. It's called Bellflower Solar. It's in Rush County, Indiana, and we're doing some really interesting work there with Department of Energy Solar Energy Technology Office, and also in partnership with the University of Illinois Chicago. And it's a research project, multi-year um, research that is looking at the ecological and economic viability of different types of seed mixes underneath and around the arrays. So we are participating in this project right now. We have several test plots installed at Bellflower, which it's a whole bunch of different seed mixes that were curated by both the DOE office plus external experts. And it's really interesting. Over the next 2 years, this team of researchers will be testing the activity around the amount of pollinator species that are attracted to these types of seed mixes. They will also be sort of testing the viability of very specific plants and how they perform or don't perform underneath panels, which is really valuable information for the industry. In our case, we're actually going to be sheep grazing on some of those different test plots to see how the vegetation reacts, and if it does react differently to areas that are sheep grazed or not in terms of growth and productivity and things like that. And then they're doing a whole sort of economic piece on it, right? These are great ideas. Multi-use solar is just a really emerging space, and as an industry, we're in need of more economic data, right? And understanding of how we can do sort of large scale installations in an efficient and economically viable way for our projects, right? So they'll be doing a whole economic analysis as well. Lightsource is participating with a number of other renewable energy companies, and I just think the results are going to be really impactful for the industry. So that's been super fun to work on this opportunity for research at Bellflower.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to see pictures of that too, if you
You
can
bet.
send me
Yeah.
afterward.
Yeah.
What would you say is preventing Lightsource from installing more projects?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, kind of there's nothing really preventing us from installing more projects. We've accelerated our pace of development to really meet the climate challenge. I mean, I think that's just a necessity right now. We're targeting 25 gigawatts globally by 2025. And our top challenges, just like really the industry at large, is transmission access, and also community understanding, which includes education around solar. At Lightsource, we formed a community relations team, to help to educate communities, but also to be really accepting of feedback from the communities where we work. So, I wouldn't say, I mean, there's challenges, yes, but I wouldn't say there's anything preventing us, from helping to mitigate the climate crisis and installing, megawatts of solar in the U.S.
Okay. That's interesting that you have a group specifically formed to help educate communities. What does that look like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's about educating communities about solar installations. For example, what do they look like? How will they be maintained? Do they make any noise? Are there any environmental risks? What happens with wildlife? I mean, all of those things. Community stakeholders are really interested in all of those topics, right? And so we are there to make sure that communities and interested stakeholders have all of the information that they need, right? Because we are long-term members of the community. But I would say that education really goes both ways, right? Because we need to learn from the community what's important to them. And often, in this two-way street process, we're learning, okay, maybe we need setbacks from certain areas, or maybe certain communities want to see a certain type of landscaping plan or vegetation plan and things like that. So we are listening. I don't and we're offering as much information as possible about the company and about the project, because we will be part of the community for the long term.
Okay, that makes sense. And my last question, what are some future product trends you're looking forward to?
Well, from an environmental perspective, because I'm always thinking about multi-use solar. I think an aspect of agrivoltaics that is very much in the R&D phase is food crops. The ability to grow clean, renewable energy and food in the same space, to me, is extremely exciting. I've learned over the years, it sounds a lot easier than it is. When you are, installing any vegetation, even food crops, under and around the arrays, they need to be compatible with the solar facility. And of course, they need to have everything required to grow. And obviously there would be a lot of shading underneath the arrays. So, I just think food and clean energy nexus is really exciting. And as I mentioned, we're doing a trial at one of our projects, and I think that is an area that needs R&D, and I think it's something that we're going to see a lot more of in the coming years, as we try to sort of maximize the land, right? The benefits of the land, and create working lands, where we're putting solar energy. So I'm really excited to see the trend with that and to see where it goes. And Lightsource, is already playing a part in that, and I expect us to in the years to come.
That is really exciting. I would love to buy some solar grown lettuce or blueberries.
Me
Cool.
too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alyssa, for your time. This has been a
Thank
fun
you,
conversation.
Kelsey. Yeah, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.